Oh, I'm such a shell. I'm such a shell. Chevelle. NIRATAS, short for nothing is real and this is a simulation. Or nothing is real, this is a simulation. Yeah, it's nothing is real and this is a simulation. But, anyways. I think we've waited a pretty good long time for this band to release this album. This is apparently the first time the band has chosen to go into a loose concept of a space rocky kind of opera-ish thing, as it seems like the album cover would entail. Though it's not the first time they've ventured in it. I mean, Sci-Fi Crimes being one of those. Though this is the third album, I believe. This is the first album where the band doesn't seem to have a bass player involved in the credits, I guess. I just yet to get this physical copy to know for sure whether or not if Dean Bertinelli was even involved at all, at least in the recording of this album, at least for the sessions. Though it does seem, though, that the band, or at least is even remotely credited for one last time here. It seems that this band has been around for a while. They've been one of the many bands that have come out of the late 90s, or at least that came out around late 90s, that started blowing up by the early 2000s during the new metal post-grunge boom. The metal boom of these more alt-metal-y post-grunge bands that somehow got lumped in, that wound up being lumped in as part of the new metal boom. And this was one of the considerably better bands amongst them that was more involved in that line of post-grunge. And usually their names were more in line with the likes of, say, Breaking Benjamin, basically. As opposed to your Korn, Limp Bizkits, and so on and so forth. But yes, I was looking forward to this thing. And for my first taste was essentially an acoustic version of Endlessly. Was there for our first taste. We never got to hear the actual version, which the actual version is really pretty good. Yeah, for sure. I get like some weird hybridization between that, to like Closure, some what does work about tracks like Glimpse of the Con. With that track, once it finally came into fruition, which is apparently, and it's before Remember When, which was a single on this record, and that, but we'll get to that eventually, because the little snippet you heard is the intro track, Verituct. They apparently decided to have something called Lost in Digital, which is apparently an outro track, a very long interlude style outro. Dude, this album. I had a feeling from what I heard from other reviews before I did go into this. The thought that came into my mind about this record and what its concept was doing and what this band has been known to do in the past coming into mind. I had this feeling that this was essentially. I mean, the Tool influences do come out very, very well a lot, and Pistol Star Gravity Heals was a. But then when Self Destructor came out, by the way, when it came to this album, holy shit. I think, at first I wasn't sure, but once they started to really like do something a little bit more progressive-ish, or at least in tendency, in terms of experimental tendency, that you would come to expect from like that specific alt prog style of like from Tool, which, given this is a producer that produced like the last two Tool albums, which granted aren't considered by many fans of Tool themselves, maybe the band members of Chevelle included, to be the most favorable, even though I will still, at the very least, Fear Inoculum did what it needed to do for me. I had to basically learn to lower my expectations of this record and appreciate it for what it needed to be, as just being the so-called what that album was. But we're hearing more about Chevelle. I don't know what their thoughts are. That'd be cool to know. And apparently they're from Chicago, or at least within the Illinois area close to Chicago. And most of the time they were a band of brothers. And then eventually well, for at least 3 albums, and then ever since it up until this point, it was, in fact, even though before it was a band of brothers, it was just Pete and Sam Loeffler and some other random guy in high school before they decided to settle on their brother Joe. And yeah. And then when he left, I think a lot of people were kind of iffy, but once they found out that they picked a brother-in-law and they kept it in the family, they kept the core thing that made the band work in the first place, and that's why these albums since have still been going and turning out as well as they have been in places. Even if some people are like, nothing's as good as what's next, there is some sect of people I used to be that way too, in a similar way to how some people are about Deftones. But anyways, I enjoyed this album from the start, from Verakt, or I don't know how I'm spelling that. I'm probably spelling that wrong, guys, and I'm sorry, but as it seems to say here, and then Solo on Mother Earth was pretty good. And most of these tracks are mostly segues. Wormhole was like 20. Peach was like the follow-up single, and it was lyrically, it was kind of a weird one. Yeah, and apparently the longest tracks on this album don't even eclipse the 6-minute mark, or at least it barely could come close to it. I mean, there's a lot of segues this album has, apparently. It has, Verakt is kind of an intro that makes me think of Open from their earlier days, and then go earlier days up to a point, and with Soul on Mother Earth, I guess, serving as a point number 1 in this case, which is still, I think, a classic in the band's repertoire, if I'm not mistaken. So, I definitely check that out. Soul on Mother Earth does get things going a little bit more once you get past Verakt. Or Verakt, I'm guessing, is how it's supposed to be pronounced, I think. More Simula, Sleep the Deep. I mean, Self-Destructor is like still definitely one of the favorites and best choices of the singles that they've had. Decided to release as singles at the very least. Because Sleep the Deep and Wormhole probably being the shortest track and clearly an interlude, and then I believe, I believe the last track, Lost in Digital Woods, is kind of sort of an outro-ish track in a similar vein, taking similarities to Verakt's stuff. And overall, for the most part, it was like, would I say it's exactly what I was thinking it was going to be going into this record? I do understand people's complaints that Lost in Digital Woods shouldn't have been the track that ended this, but I get why they chose it. And it's not a bad thing. It's very beatnik poetic. Ghost and Razor, though, that aside from, I mean, all the tracks around here are good, but if there's some real, like, okay, standouts when it comes to how this band does stuff, I would go as far as to say Ghost and Razor. And then something happened while I was listening to this album that somehow it skipped into Door to Door Cannibals. Right when I was having to start over and was getting into this track, and I noticed something that I'm not sure anyone else would notice unless this happened to you. Ghost and Razor's riff that starts this off, it's kind of the same riff as Door to Door Cannibals from the last album, The Last Corridor. It's just not nearly as beefed out. Probably because there's a lack of bass. More than likely because they don't have a bassist anymore because Dean left for his own intermediate family reasons. Which leaving Sam and Joe to basically run the ship. So, pun kind of not really intended, but we'll go with it. So, but I've enjoyed this album. I've and then but I still like it for what it is beating poetry. And if I hadn't known some people in like, for those who know about the Showdowns thing here, like Action Army and stuff like that, and some other people that are some dungeon heads, they know they. I know someone who likes beating poetry, and I think he'll totally be one of the types that dig Lost in Digital Woods up to a point. And I think he tried to do some kind of Van Halen, take the riff that they were doing throughout Ghost and Razor, the way that it was done here, at least in comparison to Door to Door Cannibals, but and just kind of go a little more whammy bar hammy with it, you know. And just to add, unlike, because that's the one thing this album I can give them even more credit for being going for a space rock theme, going for a space rock theme, and more so dealing with the concept, or loose concept that is in throughout this, is about them basically leaving Mother Earth and trying to just inhabit to another, or at least try to go to another planet to what's the word I'm thinking of? Terraform that, I guess, or something, or at least find a better planet, since Earth's kind of went to shit, or humanity at this point here has went to shit at the point of what has happened throughout this start of this entire decade, or at least everything happening within the late 2010s that has built up to this point. This was them kind of dealing with what they had in quarantine, and I don't know if I can say that they pull off the concept itself, but in terms of the more space rock thematic element, in terms of sounding spacey, they did that. And plus, Pistol Star Gravity Heals is very very Tool-esque the way it starts. In fact, I would dare say it's very much. I'm hoping I don't get too much trouble for it, but I think everyone knows about the Tool comparisons, and hopefully they got to talk to the boys about it. So, hearing the boys about it more than likely. But I hear Push It straight up with the opening riff, like straight up Push It. And Peach is probably the most death metal sounding track lyrically, or at least dealing with amputation of sorts. But I'm surprised that one on here isn't considered, given the explicit content marking on here on this YouTube music that I'm having to rely on, apparently, to listen to this stuff. So, but yeah, Ghost, so far for me, Self-Destructor, So Long Mother Earth. I mean, as far as an album as a whole, I still enjoy this one. I understand that some people don't think that the previous albums are as strong, but I'll have to like deep dive into this throughout the rest of the year, and see if I like this even more and how far it is. But so far, between this and Teenage Wrist, these are my choices I'm going to have to pick right now for album of the year, until like maybe Gojira or Mastodon or the new Van Weezer record comes out or something. Maybe that and the Foo Fighters one. They're making my top three. So that's what it's looking like. I definitely feel like coming back to this record. Dude, the best news about this, I'd actually go higher. Really, compared to those guys that gave it a 7, which I somewhat understand, and I think that's more because they weren't digging the last track, and I think that had played a part in them keeping it from being given that 8 out of 10. That would have put it over for them, giving it 8 out of 10, and I didn't hate it. So as far as I'm concerned, with what we were getting out of this album for what it is, even with the segues, which I'm used to, and that not the first time they tackled sci-fi, and they tackled spacey in a way that initially I was worried at first it was going to be this Fantastic Planet. There's something Fantastic Planet about it for sure, but I was worried it was going to be Fantastic Planet by way of Local H, especially given the fact that they're kind of become a hard rock duo at this point. But luckily that's not the case, and luckily it's definitely more closer in line with like something more Tool-esque. I mean, especially more in line with Lateralis, I'd say. It's more space rocky aspects that they were doing on that record, and in the sense that it's clearly more radio friendly. And I love the fact that once again, within these past 3 albums we've gotten from them, Joe Barresi, to me, unlike what has happened with Tool lately, even though I liked Fear Inoculum for what it was up to a degree, I believe Barresi managed to take what he had learned from Tool and apply it to Chevelle and help push them to further themselves as a band more than ever within these past 3 releases. And I think that his more radio, I feel like his style of production is meant for something like Tool, but more radio ready. And that's kind of speaks Chevelle. And I think he's done exactly, once again, he's done it. I don't know if I would say this is as a very super progressive record. I'd say it's definitely still more in line within the veins of what they've been putting out with Barresi, in not in the way that would qualify them in prog metal for Tool, but I would say it's definitely progressive. I mean, it definitely has a progressive tendency. I wouldn't say it's progressive alt metal fully, but I would say they have those progressive and experimental tendencies. I'd say their experimental tendencies are way more post-punk than progressive, especially given the influence of The Cure, which they have massively cited, which you slightly hear a little bit of Robert Smith, a little bit aside from Maynard, in Pete, a little bit in certain places, or at least certain pitches he can go to that are a little more feminine sounding than masculine sounding, at least in terms of his cleans. I don't know if you can agree with me on that, but I feel like he does take some of that to his. But the way they experiment, it's more post-punk in general, I'd say. It's post-hardcore-ish in general than I would say progressive. But civ rock, but I'd say what they did here in terms of just being more of a space rock kind of record is really done really well in that sort of post-grungy sense. Yeah, I'm digging this thing. It's very yeah. I like it. I like it a lot. Enough to still keep going to it. I don't know if it's like wow. Nothing's exactly so far this year yet has wowed me. And I guess it was 2020 found a way to spoil me in that regard. And it's gonna be a tough few years for anything to come unless they can find something that can blow that one specific album out of that, blow Spanish Love Songs out of the water. It's gonna be and whatever we got since I had 2 great years in a row musically, it's gonna be tough. I can tough. I mean, it's not gonna be. I'd be happy that it wouldn't be hard to pick some stuff, but yeah. So far, this is looking to be top tier until like Gojira comes out with something, I guess, or at least until Gojira can finally wow me with something, I guess. Or once I finally pop that cherry into, even though there's another album that I'm not sure is gonna wow me at all, but yeah, I liked this album, man. Just Chevelle's still killing it. They haven't, made me regret being a shill. So there's that. Take that for what it's worth. I'm not really a professional anyway, but as a fun fan to another, you will be very satisfied with this record in that regard, even if it's not exactly considered by some as a full-on grade, even though, like I said, I gave this a rock, and I don't know if I would go as far as to say masterclass, though, but, because I think that would be a stretch, even for this album, but because I'm not saying it's like what we've gotten the past couple albums, and especially to the level of what we had with Wonder What's Next, or even some extent of Venacera, and what slightly more progressive tendencies that Sci-Fi Crimes might have had over this one, but then again, but what did you guys think of the new Chevelle album, NIRATAS? Nothing is real, and this is a simulation. Leave a comment below, let me know. As always, guys, keep it random, keep it real, keep it rocking. I will see you in the next video. which either will be this, which will be like 2 other albums, probably another Schmodown Rocks, chances are, but yeah, it's gonna be a couple. This March is kind of gonna be busy for me. Hell, I gotta, between some albums I do need to listen to and some albums I gotta, and plus it's gonna be, I don't know, Lord knows if I may have to hold off on a couple albums and just put them as a swim. Chances are, uh, we'll see. If you don't hear anything else from me at this point, album wise, then expect to swim. So what I miss, I mean, following this, but anyways, take care, y'all. Oh, and link in the description again below. Rock the like button if you trust you must. Please subscribe, hit the notification bell, click all if you want to be able to see my videos and get notified on them. Also, Facebook page, like and follow me there. You can also follow me on Stereo if you'd like. Lord knows when I'm going to do a Stereo podcast, but it's there. It's gonna eventually happen if I can find somebody who wants to talk. So, music and Schmodown and somewhat movies, though I'm probably going to be whatever on that. Hopefully, I might get back into movies too, if things are looking up now, you know. But anyways, take care, y'all.